Welcome, travelers, to another episode of the Time Travel Trio podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Hyde.
And we're
The Time Travel Trio.
Okay.
We're back. Another.
I'm back.
Yeah, we said we'll be back, and here we are.
And here we are. Part 2 of a 2-part series on, drumroll,
The Terminator franchise.
Well,
it's more than 2-part, but for now it's 2-part. Eventually we'll get another one from James Cameron.
But it might be after this podcast is done, so.
Yeah.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah. But so far, this will be our as of yet concluded Terminator franchise episode.
Because, Avatar was, 6 years ago.
Well, he's not even going to be... He's just producing the new... From what I understand, he's not actually directing it.
Okay.
He's just going to be producing it, and Linda Hamilton is returning.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So
very
it's
similar to the John Carpenter Halloween, where I don't think he's directing it, he's producing it, but Jamie Lee Curtis is returning.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a Cameron endorsed Terminator movie that he's not actually writing and directing.
I believe so. I think he's helping with a little bit of the story development, but that's about it.
Well, at least in that case, you don't have to wait 10 years for him to be done with Avatar movies.
Well, it's funny because he actually, one of the movies we'll talk about here, he actually was a fan of Terminator Genisys. He deplored Rise of the Machines,
Yep.
but he actually liked Genisys, so that'll be an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah, so...
Speaking of which...
Yeah, so to get us started, we're doing Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, we're skipping Salvation, and we're going straight into Genisys, so... Because Salvation...
skips Salvation.
Yeah, well, Salvation, there's no time travel, it's just them up to the war, right? It's them in the apocalypse,
it's just them in the apocalypse.
Okay.
Like a whole movie set in the apocalypse, 2029. Right.
So we'll start with Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. This movie came out in 2003, was directed by Jonathan Mastow, and the synopsis says, a cybernetic warrior from a post-apocalyptic future travels back in time to protect a 25-year-old drifter and his future wife from a most advanced robotic assassin, and to ensure that they both survive a nuclear attack. Hey.
I mean, this movie's basically Terminator 2.
But not as good. Thoughts?
Like the other ones, I haven't seen this one before, so this is the first time I've seen it.
I think I probably have seen this movie, but I just blocked it from my mind for many reasons.
I've seen the movie a couple times. It's been on TV. I've seen it I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times in total.
Yeah. Okay, so what did we think?
I was not impressed. The writing was terrible between Kate and John. It just felt stale and boring.
Yeah.
And the heart of T2 was here's this Terminator that's being the father figure to this boy. There's the mother son drama, that felt real, and I don't know. And Sarah felt like a badass, so it had everything you wanted in it. But this movie, there was I don't know, it just felt like a cheap knockoff.
It was. I wouldn't even say it's the same as T2 because
plot wise.
I guess.
Arnold comes back as a good person. There's this other one that's bad, and he has to save them.
But other than the first one, I feel like that's all of these movies that he's in now.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wouldn't say they're all. I mean, yes, T2 did it first, but I kind of disagree that it's the same. The idea of him coming back and being a good guy is the same because people obviously like to see him as the good Terminator, not just the villain trying to kill Sarah. So, this movie is really terrible, and I never want to see it again for the rest of my life, and if anyone is mad at me about that, please feel free to come at me, because, boy, is Claire Danes the worst in this movie. Oh my god.
They give her moments of look, see, she's a badass too, but no, she's written to be
she is
just a woman that's written in every single movie written by men.
I mean, Nick Stahl isn't doing much better in this movie either, to be honest. It's, honestly, the most interesting character in the film is the TX robot.
I agree.
Because it's kind of like Robert Patrick's character, but with a little bit more of a sense of humor to herself.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's almost like the character is aware that she's in a bad movie. And she's just all right. I mean, this movie, I've seen it a couple of times. I've never liked it. I always felt it kind of erased the whole point of it. I know you're not the biggest James Cameron fan.
No.
But poor James Cameron. I mean, think about it. Take away all of your personal beliefs on
No,
him.
I'm not someone who is
know.
like, you deserve this
Right.
because of this movie. Like, my feelings for him as a human aside, this is a, what's the word, disgrace maybe to his characters and this world that he created with two decent enough movies.
Right, and Gale Anne Hurd's characters as well.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Terminator 2, the whole point of Terminator 2 is that you can change the future. Like, that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Then Terminator 3 says, nope, you can't.
It's inevitable.
Right, it's inevitable.
You push
it
it
always
off.
corrects itself.
Still happening. The guy that was so important, Dyson, who cares about him? The real important guy is this old white dude who's in the military.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's just everything that was great about the first two movies gets erased by this movie.
Yeah.
And it's just James Cameron, like, this is the second time in his career, at least, it's happened to him. Look at Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
He took Ridley Scott's movie, made it an action film that everyone loved, made it all about, spoiler alert, all about saving Newt and saving this girl who was on this colony. Alien 3 comes out with David Fincher. He kills
Surprise.
Newt and Hicks in, like, the first 5 minutes.
Well, no, in the beginning they're already dead. You don't even see them dead.
You don't even see them, right, they're dead. Like, it's just like, really?
Yeah.
It's like, everything, like, James Cameron makes this really good way to just finish a story. I mean, gotta give him credit. I know people are, like, kind of, like, shaky on Avatar films, but James Cameron knows when to end a story. He knows, like, this is it. This is where it needs to end. This is the beat it needs to end on.
Unless it's Avatar.
Unless
in which
it's
case,
Avatar, yeah.
5 more movies.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess he has to, like, kind of overcorrect for...
He's trying to compensate for the fact that he can't... Maybe he knows how to end a movie, but he certainly does not know how to make an original one.
I think he's just upset that people keep jacking his sequels. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to do all the sequels.
Yeah.
Stop doing my sequels.
Right, but he made... I'm not going to start a rant about Avatar, but
No,
I just will say my one piece, is that, like, you can't say that Avatar is, like, his original masterpiece, because everything about that movie is stolen from other pieces of work
Right,
that other people did.
Last Mohicans.
Pocahontas, it's like, it's bullshit.
I mean, obviously
Dance with Wolves.
the technology is what he created, obviously, to do it, but the story itself.
It's like fucking Jungle Book, you know? It's like, okay, yeah, you can make this movie now, and because you have more advanced CGI technology, that doesn't mean that it's an original story. Jungle Book wasn't trying to be an original story. Avatar claimed that it was like this is why I have this big issue with Avatar, is because I don't think it should have been nominated for Picture of the Year. Thank God it didn't win, but I feel like a Picture of the Year should be something that does a good job of each aspect of the filmmaking process. He was very strong in, like, the CGI and technology and, like, the artistic direction of it. I think, yes, it was very beautiful, very grand, cool.
It was definitely an experience.
It's
like those 3D glasses, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it should be Picture of the Year.
Well, I mean...
Anyway.
Yeah, no, and not that this movie was going to get anywhere close to that Rise of Machines, but it's just, it's just so... It's not original, but it's such a diversion from what the series is that it's kind of jarring and insulting all at the same time. Like, it gets really silly. Like, at one point, there's, like, some silly sound effects where, like, the TX grabs Arnold Schwarzenegger and it makes kind of like a whip sound as she throws him into a wall.
Jarring, almost.
Like, and it's, like, bowling sound effects and everything.
Yeah.
And you're just like, how did this go from a gritty sci-fi slasher flick and sci-fi adventure flick to this, like a sci-fi adventure, almost comedy?
Yeah.
I mean,
at the start, like, you know, obviously harking back to when Arnold Schwarzenegger walks naked into a bar, when it's like tough guys, you're like, hey, you can't be naked in here. Now it's like, oh, it's a strip club, and girls are like, oh my god, he's naked. And like, that's the start of it. It's like silly, you know, and all that stuff.
It's very, very different. I mean, the Terminator movies have always had particularly Terminator 2, definitely played up some of the humor in the dark comedy of the situation.
Yeah, but it also had heart with his character. It's like, oh, look at him trying to be human, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, there wasn't any of that in Terminator 3. It was just boring. Let's watch the trailer.
The life you know, all the stuff you take for granted, it's not gonna last. Imagine a world of permanent darkness, where machines control man's destiny. Imagine you were the only one who could stop it. But before you do, something terrible has to happen.
All military systems have been infected.
This can't be happening.
John Connor was here. Where is he?
Are you going to kill me?
No. My mission is to protect you.
Oh, God. She's coming. TX, can you find a way to destroy her?
Unlikely. I'm an obsolete design. TX has corrupted my system.
The machines, they're starting to take over. Judgment Day. The end of the world. It's today, 3 hours from now.
Get away from me! Now!
What is your mission? To ensure the survival of John Connor.
You are about to fail that mission. You don't have to do this. You don't want to do this.
Desire is irrelevant. I am a machine.
Wow. Before I even forget, there's a line that they use in that trailer that's like, I'm an obsolete model or whatever, obsolete machine, which is hilarious because in Genisys, that's his whole thing is like, I'm old, but I'm not obsolete.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that
It's almost like Genisys poking fun at that.
yeah, like this whole trailer was like a huge part of the trailer was the third act where like he gets corrupted.
It's
But
yeah,
like that wasn't that big of a deal in the movie.
No, they make it seem like that is the big climax.
Like that he's gonna be like halfway through the movie. He's gonna have to take it on.
Like they're returning to like the first one
Yeah.
almost in that sense.
But
that's not the case at all.
He just powers down and he's fine.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember seeing that. I remember being in the theater seeing that trailer, and I don't know what movie it was before I was seeing, but I remember seeing that trailer and thinking, oh, so what's going to end up happening is he's going to have to fight two cybernetic designs. And I was like, that's interesting. Because, like, they've always had... I was like, okay, so this is a good way to play it up. Like, they've always had... Either it's only been one, or when there was another one, they had Arnold Schwarzenegger protect them. Now they're not. It's going to be two. Like, that's going to be dangerous. But, yeah, it's just... They don't... You know, I won't say that. I'll say this. There's a couple of interesting nuggets they put in here that they never... That are just trapped in such a terrible movie that they don't give you any enjoyment. There's also a deleted scene that I saw last night where they are talking, they're in the bunker, like the military base, and they're showing like the program, the pitch of these weapons.
Okay.
And they built everyone based off of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has actually this like clearly dubbed over voice of this southern like redneck guy who's like has this kind of goofy voice. And he's like, hey y'all, like my name is like Sergeant blah blah blah. Like I was chosen as like the ideal candidate for this machine. And blah blah. Like everyone's gonna sound and look like and be built like me because like I'm one of the best soldiers. And then everyone's like, I like it except the voice. And then there is this guy who has Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice dubbed over into him, like this kind of gruff looking like Russian dude who's like, we can fix it. And I actually thought that was actually pretty clever.
I mean,
was like,
it's pretty funny.
That's funny.
And like I was like, I wish that scene had been in this movie.
Yeah. That would be more fun.
You know, the whole idea that like the TX, like a scene where she like puts her arm through like the cop and starts driving, very much reminded me of the T-1000 in Terminator 2 where he like sends like his blade through like the milk carton.
Oh yeah.
And leaves the mom.
Yeah.
Like little things like that were kind of cool.
Like, I mean, yeah, this isn't a fan movie that's like shitting on the franchise. It's just it feels too much like a cash grab.
Yes.
You
Well,
know?
it's also rated R, which I think is not necessary. I mean, there's a lot of violence and like maybe this scene like that with her like driving through the guy's body.
Right.
But they could have made this PG-13 and maybe it would have even been more enjoyable. Like, maybe
Yeah.
they were trying to go too edgy or something, but it just doesn't work, and I think it falls flat. No one in the history of the world, I'm sorry, has ever given a shit about John Connor and his love life. Like, that has never been a thing. And so the fact that that's, like, the big crux of this story
Like
is...
the human part of it.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
like, okay, just because we can't have Sarah in this movie, so
Give him a wife.
give him
Wife.
a wife that
Never
he
existed
doesn't like,
in any
she doesn't
entity.
like him, none of us like her.
And the quote-unquote romance is them, her being like, okay, well, we're together now in
Yeah,
this bunker, so I love you.
It's like, well, what else you can do? I mean, there's
Like,
no one
e-
else to have sex with.
yeah, it's that's
even
not
though
love.
even though my fiance died this morning, I don't care. I love you now.
Yeah, this movie is written by men, and you can tell because they don't know how to write women, which is so often a big problem in Hollywood movies.
Which is, I mean, like, obviously we expect that nowadays, unfortunately. But in this franchise, it's been built off of Sarah Connor, who is
Right.
like a legitimate badass.
Yeah, so like they think that making the character of Kate, who's Claire Danes' character, making her real by making her just mean and snarky. It's not even like a cute kind of snarky. It's just like rude. She's just
Right.
kind of rude. She's never really grateful. She never does anything interesting. She's always the third wheel. I would have been fine without her at all in this movie,
Yeah,
honestly.
like she doesn't really add much to the movie other than like someone who's like the straight man. But it would have been just as enjoyable if they actually were a couple that loved each other.
hmm
And now she's been thrown this. Maybe he didn't tell her about all
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And-
Maybe he thought he had somehow, because and that would have been interesting. I thought I had fixed it, so I thought I could just go and have a normal life.
And like put it behind me. Yeah.
Right.
I know.
That would have been
That
very
would have been much
interesting.
better.
But instead, we get this forced coincidence of them being in the same school, kissing in the basement in 8th grade,
Ew.
and then she remembers
Like-
him,
like-
and then her dad is like the guy that's important. It's like that's
Right.
just such a forced coincidence, like a three-pronged
It's-
forced coincidence.
Yeah, there's no good storytelling in that at all. 8th grade John Connor is still someone I feel like who was focused more on like,
Video games and skateboarding.
And like
No.
hacking ATMs.
well, yeah,
Yeah, we
hacking
saw him.
ATMs, like being more of like an action type of person, like trying to save the world, understand technology maybe. Like, I don't see him, I mean, maybe because that's like a quote-unquote common experience for kids or
Right.
something, that like when you're a teenager you do that, but she's so boring. Her fiance is killed in one of the least like dramatic deaths I think I've seen in any of these Terminator movies. Like, even people who are like killed by like a car flipping on top of them have like more interesting death scenes. Like, this guy was just like, who are you? I was like,
Blood splatter.
Yeah.
Violence, edge.
yeah, because it was like, oh, obviously this guy has no personality,
Right.
nothing interesting to say. All he is her fiance. They're not even married, so okay, he's obviously gonna die, and he's gonna bring
He's
nothing to
got
the
to
story.
die. It's,
Yeah.
because she hasn't married him, so she's not super attached to him yet.
Right,
So
right.
she can't be traumatized for it. It's like what?
Yeah.
Why? At that point, just make him the boyfriend. At
Yeah.
that point, like,
It's-
if she's
Yeah.
not gonna be, if she's gonna get over it that quickly, just make him the boyfriend. Or
Right?
maybe
It's only like a
the-
couple days, and then they're like, "Well, we're stuck in this bunker together. Guess I'm over my dead fiance,
Yeah,
who I
yeah.
pretended to love."
Like, that doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that.
No.
I will say, I know I've plugged this show before, but honestly, if you really like the Terminator mythos, and you want to see more in-depth character building, watch the Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, starring Lena Headey and Thomas Dekker and Summer Glau. It's actually a pretty good show, especially considering the budget restraints. They have some really good action scenes in there, but you find out way more about Sarah Connor, and Lena Headey does a great job playing her. Thomas Dekker plays John Connor, and if you want to see if you are itching for some John Connor romance angst,
Oh my god,
he begins to have
no one in the world.
romantic, or at least he begins to have a dependent love on Summer Glau, who is a hijacked T-800 model, like a female T-800 model, which is actually interesting. I know it sounds corny. It actually plays very well, because if you have no women to talk to, and the only woman you're talking to is a robot, and she looks like Summer Glau, you're probably going to be like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is just like, oh, Claire Danes is just some person who we happen to be together. I don't know. I couldn't understand if it was like they were trying to make a nod to like Back to the Future 2 or something, where it's like Marty and Jennifer have to go because they're like married, but like that's already an established relationship. We've never seen
There's no
John
mention
and
of
Kate
her.
together. Yeah, there's never a mention of her before or after this movie.
I mean, the reason why she's a target is because apparently in the future, John recruits her to be like they somehow meet after the apocalypse or even before, whatever. I don't know. Like somehow they get married and she's like his right hand person. But like assuming that the trajectory of their characters before the TX appeared, she would have married her fiance and they would have had a life. And how would they have met in the apocalypse?
0% chance. I agree. I mean, at least give her some sort of a job or something that shows that she like has something in common with John. I think that was the biggest thing that I liked.
Yeah, she's
as
just
someone who likes romance is that they had nothing in common. She was mean, poorly written, and just like bothersome. And he's like, yeah, he's John Connor, he's kind of boring, and he's like very average, whatever, white boy who tries to save the day all the time. But at least give them something in common, action-wise or something. Like maybe she does kickboxing even. Like I would take that over like she runs a pet hospital.
Yeah, but she's just the daughter of the general, which is like, okay.
Why not make her like a technician, like a military technician who maybe had something very key, like maybe she worked on something or even saw the plans to something that makes her a very key threat after the apocalypse.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's touch on the time travel again. It's the same as it always is.
I mean, I don't want to focus on this movie because the Genisys has so much more to talk about. And we can rail on T3 all day, pretty much, on how bad it is. But yeah, basically, after T2, they just postponed the apocalypse because I guess the military program that was behind what Dyson was doing was still kicking, so it's now a software, and so it still ends up being Judgment Day just in 2004 instead of 1997. So basically, same deal. Apocalypse still happens, and just eventually they send back Terminators, and that's them trying to prevent the future again.
Yeah.
I mean, it does confirm that they changed things in T2, if we're thinking of the continuity of, like, is it consistent, or can they change things? Yeah, now it's just been postponed.
Yeah, and the consequences of that are just, obviously, changing things, but,
Yeah, it's weird because, like, there's no trope of instantly changing things in the franchise. Like, how, like, Marty's disappearing, nothing disappears, there's no pictures that change. Like, the robots that get sent back, they don't, like, whatever they do to Skynet in the present day doesn't seem to affect them at all. It's just, like, they still do their thing, and the future is still far away, and that's where the changes happen.
Yeah. So, like, there's a point where John, like, threatens to kill himself, I think, or something. And, like, maybe when they're in the graveyard, was it? And so I was thinking, like, what would happen if he killed himself? Like, the machines would win?
Well, I guess they would. I mean, you wouldn't know. It wouldn't be like basically a new timeline it is suggested that a new timeline is created every time someone goes back, and literally it's just trying to hold timeline together. But if John Connor were to die, the timeline would change. Everything would just play out.
So essentially, no one would ever go back, though, because they wouldn't need to, because they only go back to to stop John.
Exactly.
No one would ever go back.
Yeah. Which, like, apparently it's really hard to kill John Connor.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's more of a discussion in Genisys because he is the villain, ultimately, by the end. Spoilers when we get to that movie. But, yeah, so T3...
It's in the trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. I knew, like, I didn't even see Genisys. I will get into it in a minute, but I hadn't seen Genisys, but I knew that he was the villain just because they played that up so much in the trailer. But,
and also, if you're watching the movie, if you know anything about movies, you'll know that he'll come back. And when you see him again, he's like, oh, he's not normal. Yeah.
One quick side note before we switch to the next movie, or actually two quick side notes. One, did you enjoy the magical growing boobs from the robot?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean it just because of, like, the pervert in me. I mean it because it makes...
As a fan of boobs.
As a fan of boobs. As a connoisseur of boobs. No, I mean, I thought... It made sense. It's kind of like that Men in Black 2 thing. And in the movie that was so dreadfully...
Men in Black 2.
Like, it was so dreadfully, like, just trying too hard. It was actually a scene that hit and landed. Because it's like, yeah, if you were a robot and you're like, all right, I'm trying to, like, blend in, but also like take people off guard. Yeah, give yourself big boobs.
And well, it's because she's like pulled over by the cop, and so she like grows her boobs.
Right.
So that the cop
she
lets
sees
her
a
go.
she sees a billboard.
Right. It's like it makes sense. Like you're
Yeah, it's
adapting to
pretty
human
funny.
culture. This Robert Patrick's character does the same thing. The original T-1000 does the same thing to blend in.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, use what you got, T-1000.
Yeah.
TX.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to talk about Chris Hardwick.
Yeah, that was my
Did
you realize that was him?
Yes, I did.
I don't know if I would have recognized him.
We've talked about it before.
Maybe his voice,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah.
I knew he was in this just separately, but then I forgot watching the movie that he was going to show up. And when I saw him, I was like, oh yeah, Chris Hardwick. And Jen was like, what?
Yeah, it is before he got good looking, I'll just tell you that.
Yeah, he
Before he got that podcast money.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when he got sober, but at some point during Singled Out, he was an alcoholic, and you know, then he lost a lot of weight and looks great and everything like that. Now he's like a Time Lord in his own right, he's ageless.
So much money.
But I always see him tweet about this because people like send him pictures of him, like, you know, talking about the mainframe and all that stuff, and he always is like, yes, he owns it for sure. So it's really funny.
Cool. Let's just close out Rise of the Machines
and just
now.
give our reviews.
And then give our reviews, give our ratings, and then move on to the next one. So let's start with Hyde.
Okay, and this is my movie rating on this thing has to be, I'm going to give it a 3.5. There's a few action pieces that are decent. Obviously, cybernetic boobs, you know, that gives it like 0.2 points, you know, one for each boob. But it's just a kind of a joyless cash grab film. It's not horrible. It's like we've seen so much worse doing this show. But it's just such a...
In the context.
Yeah, it's just a slap in the face of the fans of the franchise. So, 3.5. I'm
going to give it a 2 out of 10. Because I just thought some of the action went on way too long.
Yeah, the 20-minute car action scene.
Yeah, it just got boring. And just overall, how it was written, how Claire Danes' character was written, was really disappointing. So, you know, it didn't bring much to the table. So... 2 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I'll give it a 3 because I didn't hate it outright, but I was just bored and it wasn't that great. And considering how much I was surprised by the T1 and T2 and how like good they were together, this just tainted it. The whole, you know, this just put a stain on like, oh yeah, the T1 and T2 are great. You know, what else can they do? And like, oh, that, all right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, 3 out of 10 for me. You know, one of the points is for Hardwick. But yeah, I agree that the 20-minute car action sequence, even though it had a lot of destruction, I'm just, for the most part, car action sequences, I'm kind of just bored. It's just a personal thing for me. I don't know. I just don't like car action.
Time travel?
I mean, it's pretty much the same as the movie, but I'm going to deduct a lot of points because it erases the whole message of 1 and 2. So while normally I probably would have given this like a 6 or a 7 because the time travel is very simple and very easy to understand. Just because it erases the mechanics, I'm going to bump it all the way down to a 3. Just because you basically took a crap on one of the best sci-fi uses of time travel ever, especially from the 80s or 90s. So, yeah.
I agree with you. I want to give the time travel a 3 out of 10 as well. It doesn't, you know, for the third movie in a franchise, it doesn't bring anything new to the table. It recycles and like almost lessens, as you were kind of saying, the time travel that we've already seen. There is absolutely nothing new or interesting. Yeah, the time travel is very simple, but you know, it's pretty dull. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's boring when we all agree on the same thing. Maybe, I don't know, but I agree. It's 3 out of 10 for me as well. Same reason. I gave T1 and T2 a 5 because even though it was fine, there wasn't enough to get into, and it's the same idea except just done again and nothing new. So it kind of lessened the first 2. So 3 out of 10 for me.
Cool. Surprisingly, this movie is pretty highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 70%. Average rating is 6.6 out of 10, which feels very high to me. The average audience score is 3 out of 5, which is still basically the same as...
So only 40% of the audience liked it. So this seems to be one where the fans of this franchise were not as high about it as the critics were.
The critics' consensus says, although T3 never reaches the heights of the second movie, it is a welcome addition to the Terminator franchise. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, anyways.
So, okay, that being said, let's move on to the next one. So, as we mentioned before, we're skipping Salvation. It doesn't have anything to do with time travel, pretty much.
Yeah.
So,
But Genisys does a lot.
Genisys does a lot, which I think we all kind of knew. Did you see it?
I did not see it in theaters. The trailers did not interest me, so I did not see it in theaters. This is actually the first time I've ever watched this movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, same here. You know, at this point in 2015, I hadn't seen any of the Terminator franchise, so I was like, all right, I don't need to see this. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, I remember being like, oh, okay, that looks okay, but I never, like, got enough of an urge to actually want to see it.
It also, the trailer made it seem like, you know, the first movies, now it's different. I'm like, well, I've never seen them, so I feel like I would be more confused if I just go in there into a blind, you know?
Yeah. So the synopsis for this movie, which is Terminator Genisys, says, when John Connor, leader of the human resistance, sends Sergeant Kyle Reese back to 1984 to protect Sarah Connor and safeguard the future, an unexpected turn of events creates a fractured timeline. It's directed by Alan Taylor, and Arnold is back. Also stars Jason Clarke, Emilia Clarke, Jai Courtney, and J.K. Simmons. As well as, I have to say, Matt Smith, but...
J.K. Simmons.
Barely Matt Smith.
Barely,
Yeah.
yeah. It was, like, almost disappointing.
Not enough.
Yeah, definitely not enough. But,
Matt Smith cameo.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because, like, his name popped up as Matthew Smith, and I was like, oh, look, Matt Smith, jokingly, like, but no, it actually is Matt Smith, because I'm just used to seeing him be referred to as Matt Smith.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Even in Doctor Who, he's credited as Matt Smith. But,
Yeah.
Now he's like, I want to be a serious actor. Now I'm Matthew Smith.
Yeah, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, if you want to be a serious actor, don't, like, change your name so it's not Matt Smith. Like, I know 3 Matt Smiths, I feel like.
But yeah, so initial thoughts. I mean, I was surprised by this movie in a way that was refreshing after seeing T3. I was like, oh, they
Yeah.
went for it. And, you know, for better or worse, I liked that they, like, really went for something different, and they, like, time travel more than once, and they changed things. They took a risk, I think, and...
I liked in
Yeah.
your notes that you misspelled Genesis.
Yeah, I purposely
Is
crossed it out. I was like, where's the Y
hilarious.
in there?
Because they misspelled Genesis, and that's something I have to mention, because there's no reason why it's
Right.
misspelled. I'm like, if you're gonna misspell a word on purpose, there needs to be a reason. Make it, like, stand for something, or, like,
Well, I
you
thought
know?
that was going to be like the new system, so it's called Genisys or something. Like, I was expecting for, like, that scene to happen.
Yeah,
But-
like, it's called Genesis because it stands for, like, genetically engineered neurotic,
Right.
whatever,
Nope.
blah, 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 system.
It's like my running joke where I say, like, people add a
Whatever.
Z on the end of something to make it edgy.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
Silicon Valley mumbo jumbo. It's like in the title it's GENI, but in the movie it's GENE, right?
No,
Oh,
it's spelled like this in the movie.
okay.
It's just for no reason.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for no reason. But other than that, I like this movie more than I thought I would. Yeah, I think part of that though is because we had watched Rise of the Machines right before this, so it kind of elevated this movie maybe more than if it was just like watched on its own. But I don't think it was a bad movie overall.
Yeah, there are things that they did that improved on what I expected to see from T3. It's like, okay, now we're back with Sarah and Reese, who I liked from T1, you know, and now we have a Terminator like Arnold Schwarzenegger that's more like T2 when they're trying to be human. He has these funny moments.
Yeah.
So it kind of brought those two together.
What did you think?
Yeah, I surprisingly like this. I don't love it. I don't even really like it. But, you know, compared to T3 and Terminator Salvation, like, this is... And like you said, it made bold choices. Like, it tried to do something cool with the mythos. The action scenes in this movie are great. The story is kind of a mess. But the action in this movie, like the fights against the Terminators, like, they give you everything. They give you a T-1000. They give you a TX-style robot. They give you time travel fights. They give you old Arnold Schwarzenegger versus young Schwarzenegger. Like, the action in this movie is really, really good. Like, if you can get past maybe some of the issues with the story, you're going to be in for a very entertaining film at the very least.
Yeah, I wasn't bored by the action. Like, sometimes the T3 I was like, oh, come on. But in Genisys I was like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm following.
Well, the fights are creative. They always found new things to do. Like, they found new ways to kill Terminator. They found, like, instead of just shooting it, like the characters had to use their minds to like outsmart it, which I'm always a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
Terminator 3 is a lot of them just running, firing bullets, and then just getting lucky with explosions and like destruction porn. And this one, they actually have to like, you see why Sarah Connor is so smart. You see how Kyle Reese is like so resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes it, you learn. I like action scenes where you learn about the characters through the decisions they make in an action fight. So yeah.
I liked Emilia Clarke a lot. Jai Courtney, I think, kind of brought down the movie a little bit. He's not bad, but I think someone else in that role maybe could have elevated it.
Yeah.
I felt like he kind of weighed it down.
I definitely
not
prefer
in a good way.
I definitely prefer Michael Biehn as Reese over
Michael Biehn was
Jack Courtney for
great.
sure.
Jai Courtney is too much of a soldier, whereas like in the first movie, he was
A man sent back in
he was
time.
a soldier, but he was also someone who was humble enough to know that he didn't understand this new world that he was
Right.
living in.
Right.
And I think that, and then, you know, yeah, he went to save Sarah Connor, but it was because he loved her, not because he's, like, was following an order. Whereas
Right.
this one kind of fell
It
on
leaned
more
towards
of,
that.
like, well, I'm a soldier, and they kind of threw, like, a little bit of the whole, like, he loves Sarah Connor from the stories that John would tell him, a little bit. But it wasn't enough, whereas I felt like in the first one it was enough.
Well, in the first one, it's like he's in love with her, but it never feels like manipulated. It almost feels like he's created the own time loop. Like that at one point you feel like way back when they invented time travel, he went back. There wasn't even a John Connor. He just went back, found this woman and like ended up falling in love with her. Like it just felt more organic.
Yeah.
Whereas here, to be fair, they also are trying to. They don't ever really slow down enough for that to happen, where you can feel like that. Like Terminator has a lot of scenes where the characters are just talking and learning about each other.
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. The difference is totally that we don't really see much at all of a John Connor
right.
in the first one. In this one, it's all about him. And since the second movie, really, they're all about him.
Which is kind of a shame because it's always felt more like Sarah Connor's story with John Connor thrown in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean...
Well, the white man has to save the day.
Well, yeah. I mean, Emilia Clarke... I mean, obviously she's not on Linda Hamilton's level. Despite her Mother of Dragons pedigree.
No.
She
was good. She wasn't as... Linda Hamilton was, like, tough as nails kind of attitude. And Emilia Clarke is like, she'll punch you in the face, but she's not going to, like, punch you with, like, a glove of knives.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, it's true.
That she grinded herself.
Yeah.
From
her teeth in prison or something. Like, you can...
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I realized that, like, this Sarah Connor is still 20, like she was in Terminator 1, but she's, like, been hardened, like, not to the point in T2, obviously, where she's been, you know,
like,
institutionalized in her 30s now, so she's still 20. So she has those, like, things, but yeah, it isn't as
But then she should have been,
badass.
Because of her situation starting when she was so much younger, she should have been more tough.
Yeah.
Like, more closer to where Linda Hamilton was in T2.
They do get away with some of her less toughness by making her very resourceful and smart and a quick thinker.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she does lose some of that ruthlessness that the original Sarah Connor had. I don't know who I would have cast. I know they're recasting for the new film that's going to have Linda Hamilton come back. They're going to have a younger Sarah Connor. And I know they're recasting. They haven't decided yet. Okay. I don't know who I personally would. I'm sure there's someone I can think of. But,
interesting.
You know, it's funny because I actually don't like that she's been cast as Captain Marvel. But Brie Larson might have been an interesting choice here because she's a very good actress. Mm-hmm. And I could see her playing like a very ruthless person.
Yeah.
But now that she's doing Miss Marvel, that's never going to happen. So
yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to do the trailer?
Yeah.
I forgot we haven't played it yet.
I look at each of you, and I see the marks of this long and terrible war. If we die tonight, mankind dies with us. The machine sent a Terminator back to the time before the war to kill my mother, Sarah Connor.
Sir, let me save her.
What you're doing right now, this is the end of the war.
She
find me going back to her, she'll be scared and weak.
Take care of her for me, Kyle.
Come with me if you want to live. Now, soldier!
This is all wrong. John sent me here to save you.
From the Terminator that was sent back to kill me, I know, but we already took care of him.
We have been waiting for you.
The time John sent you to, it no longer exists. Everything's changed. We can stop Judgment Day from happening.
Run! Where is he?
I'll be back.
What?
That was before they revealed John Connor in the trailers.
I was thinking that too. That must have been the first one.
That was the first theatrical trailer. They did not start revealing that John Connor had been infected until the TV spots because I think they were getting worried about they weren't tracking well for like a good opening.
Yeah, I mean that,
which explains a lot because that trailer.
The trailer's kind of boring.
The music is cool. I remember really liking the music.
Mm-hmm.
But the trailer makes it seem like, okay, well, they're just going to find another T-1000.
Yeah, they put too many of those T-1000 scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Where they should have shown, I don't know, like a few things from maybe later in the movie.
I honestly think they should have shown. They didn't have to show that it was John Connor, but they should have just had some sort of thing like it's like evolved or like it's like a bigger being, and then they should have just shown him on the bridge where it's like the naked skin, not the John Connor face, and he's walking because it's like, oh wait, what is that? Because that would have been tantalizing. Instead of the final shot should have been the John Connor. What is it? What is it considered?
Oh, he doesn't have one. It's like they refer to the material, but they don't actually give him a model name.
Okay, they don't give him a model name.
Yeah.
No.
So it's like they should have done that instead of the final shot is them holding onto the side of the bridge with like the bus floating into the water. That's just not compelling as compared to. And then, like, him making, like, I'll be a back joke while flying headfirst into a helicopter. Like, that's just not selling it for me.
Yeah.
But if I had seen that at the end of that trailer, I'd been like, whoa,
yeah.
wait.
If they showed the new, like, actual villain, and if they alluded to more about the fractured timeline, because they just said, like, oh, things are different now. But they didn't imply, like, oh, no, things are really fucked up with the timeline.
Right.
Yeah. So let's get into the time travel for this one. As you were just saying, it's a different timeline when Kyle Reese goes back to the past.
Yeah, at first we're watching it and we're like, okay, so this is basically the other side of the time travel from the first movie, where we know that Judgment Day happened in 1987, like it did originally, and then now we're just seeing Kyle Reese be sent back by John Connor kind of before, and then when he arrives, things are different.
Yeah.
And that's when we discover that, like, oh no, someone, they try to kill Sarah Connor in 1973, and so now we're in a timeline where basically T2, quote-unquote, happened in 1973 to Sarah Connor, where a T-1000 came to kill her, and Arnold came back to save her.
Yeah. I like the idea that they went back to Sarah Connor's past.
Right.
I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, instead of just trying to keep killing young John Connor. Well,
because it failed, you know?
Exactly. The idea makes sense. It's like, okay, Sarah Connor is really tough to beat when she's an adult.
Yeah.
So let's beat her when she's a kid.
Yeah. So that was cool. Rules of this time travel, so you can't wear clothes when you go in the machine.
Right, yeah, the basic stuff is the same, except the timeline stuff is...
The timeline stuff is different.
Right.
And we also get to actually see it being used.
Right.
Like from the other side of it. Not just someone appears in like a giant energy bubble.
Right.
But yeah, the timeline is different. They also just kind of pick random years in this movie. We were trying to figure out if there was like some sort of a rhyme or reason why they go to 2017 when like the very least, like, go to 2015, which is like present day when this movie comes out. I don't understand.
Yeah,
why
I
they
mean,
went to 2017.
There is some sort of mythos behind it, and I'm just I can't remember what it is, because
Well,
there's a reference to it.
I thought maybe it was like the date of the new Judgment Day after T2, but that's like 2004. I guess maybe just from watching it in 2015, the present day is a little bit advanced. Like, not by a lot, but a little bit. Like, you know, it's far enough in the future, like, oh, maybe they have more technology then. That's the only reason I could think of to choose 2017. But, again, I don't know everything about the franchise. It just feels random
to me.
I think it was like the idea of, I mean, I do, and this is actually one of the things in the script I thought was really inventive, that basically Cybernet just becomes like Facebook or like your Instagram.
Well, it's like Google, where all the apps touch everything. And
right.
It's like Apple and Google.
Which is smart. I mean, it makes total sense. Like, if you, in the 80s, no one could have ever predicted, like, what the internet was going to become to, like, our mobile device. Like, so it's like, Cybernet doesn't even have to trick people. It's like, oh, they're just already there. Like, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, huh. And plus, if Cybernet, like, ever saw, like, the comments on a YouTube video or a Huffington Post article, they would be like, yeah, we gotta just blow this whole place up. Like, there's no good left here.
Right, yeah.
Just you got 3 billion people.
Yeah, we're doing good here. Says Matt Smith.
Says Matt Smith.
But yeah, I mean, so the idea of the fractured timeline, they explain in the movie, we have a clip of when Kyle explains like that he has new memories from a timeline that he didn't live, which kind of illustrates the timelines being fractured and
and this is when they're about to go to the future.
Right.
They're about to time travel. He's with Sarah already, and they're about to time travel to the future in order to stop Genisys. Because he saw, as we're about to see, visions as when he was traveling back to 1984.
Look, I can't hold on to all of it, just moments, but I was given a message. You can kill Skynet before it's born. Skynet is Genisys. It comes online October 2017. When it does, Judgment Day happens.
So you're remembering the future?
No. The boy is the alternate timeline version of you. Kyle Reese is remembering his own past, which is our future.
That makes it so much better. How can he be remembering 2 timelines?
It is possible if you were exposed to a nexus point in the time flow when you were in a quantum field.
Can you stop him talking like that? Is there a switch or something?
Pops, try again.
A nexus point is an event in time of such importance that it gives rise to a vastly different future.
After John was attacked, when I was in the sphere, that's when the memories began.
John! If John Connor were to be killed or compromised, it could result in the ability to remember both pasts. Theoretically.
So, that basically explains the fractured timeline and why... and
why Kyle Reese has it, because he was in a quantum field when things were like, oh no, significant change.
Almost shielded from his memories rewriting.
Right.
Basically.
So that he had memories of both timelines, which is cool.
It also does something that, like, it pays off in a time travel aspect of him seeing memories, and, like, when we see them happen, like, because he has a memory of Sarah Connor giving him the line from his finger, which, that with her knowing that, she then does it to a young Kyle Reese. You know?
Yeah.
Which is satisfying to see in a time travel movie when they do those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't hate the whole idea of, like, he sees bits and pieces and we don't really know what it means until later, and then we see them unfold throughout the rest of the story. I like that, as long as it's not, like, overdone, but I think this movie does a decent job with that concept.
Yeah, there's a couple of key things that it helps do, and they at least had an explanation.
Yeah.
Like, however you feel about the fractured timeline and how it does, you know, it's I think probably the poor review score that we'll see later on is from the people, is that, like, it felt too convoluted. But however you feel about that, like, at least allow them to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went for it. I mean, it makes sense in, like, the mechanics of the universe, that if you are time traveling and you would see that something had drastically changed, then you would be immune, for the most part, to, like, a changed timeline, because you're going back kind of at the very edge of it. So you know it's something that was wrong, and yet you'd have a chance to change it. It's cool. It's different. I mean, if you're going to do a Terminator series sequel, I wish they had done more of that in the trailer. It may have gotten more people to see it. This is one of the few movies that didn't cross 100 million in America, North America, but managed to cross 100 million in China. And it's like, because, you know, if you live in China or some other foreign land from America, if you're going to go see a movie, you don't really want to see a movie with a ton of dialogue. You want to see a movie with a lot of action that you can just kind of watch and be like, okay, cool, this is happening.
Yeah.
So it makes sense it did well in Russia and China and not here, because everyone was thinking, oh, they're just going to fight a new T-1000 who's not Robert Patrick. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
It's like the same thing. I think also part of the problem with this movie is that Sarah Connor is too nice.
She's very nice.
Especially to Arnold. I think that their whole... I didn't hate that, like, she ended up seeing him as a father figure, but it didn't feel like her.
Right.
And I think that is maybe, like, where this big disconnect is.
Between her and Linda Hamilton.
Yeah, between her and Linda Hamilton, yeah.
Like, Linda Hamilton's character never fully trusts the machine until the very end.
Yeah.
And I think that was important.
Right.
And,
it is important.
I mean, yeah, so...
I mean, I get that you'd I think, obviously, if it's a young Sarah Connor, it's going to be different, because if it's been protecting her whole life, she's going to have a much more attachment
Yeah,
to
and
it.
she didn't have the crazy thriller experience from T1, where she was literally stalked by this crazy skeleton.
So it does make sense. It's not that it's poor writing. It just doesn't read true to the character, in a sense.
Yeah.
It just feels like it always felt like she should always be a little suspicious of technology.
Yeah.
And John Connor should be a lot more like, oh yeah, technology's great. We can use it how we need to. You know, and so that kind of gets lost here. She kind of ends up becoming a mesh between Sarah Connor and John Connor, which is interesting. Not knocking it necessarily. And I think, you know, I will be honest, like, I think Emilia Clarke can sometimes be kind of hit or miss with the role she gets. I think she's been miscast a lot because she plays this very fierce mother of dragons. She gets those kind of characters. She kind of isn't, this sounds weird to say, but she doesn't feel grizzled enough. She doesn't feel like, I like that Emilia Clarke definitely, you know, beefed up the arms a little bit and all that jazz. But, like, body type-wise, I'm not saying anything about her physical appearance. I'm just saying she doesn't feel like someone who has been running her entire life.
I think she still has
death.
too much of, like, a quote-unquote fresh face.
Yeah.
So to speak. That, like, it doesn't feel like when you want someone in, like, these action roles that have, like, this weight to them and, like, have dealt with shit in their lives before we meet them in the movies, their face needs to feel like it's lived through stuff.
Yes.
Hers still feels too young. And I agree with you about her being miscast. I can't think of the name of the movie, but there's like this really sad romance movie with the guy from Hunger Games.
Oh, yes, where the guy's in the, he's disabled or paralyzed.
Yeah. I can't think of what it's called, sorry. I'll look it up.
Me Before You.
Me Before You, yeah. And I saw the movie and I really liked her. She played like a young, quirky, like kind of a little bit off, but like fun, happy sort of person. And she was like, I totally bought it. I thought she was really great in that. And so I think maybe something like staying a little bit more in her field in that sense, I think would be more of a benefit. Whereas like this, and it even felt like the trailer we watched was like trying to rely on her to bring in an audience. But you're right. People see what we saw of like, there's not enough believability that, like, this is Sarah Connor. She's already lived through 11 years of shit.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
One of my favorite examples of, like, an actress's face who, like, every time I see her in something, I'm like, oh, this character's been through something. Kelly Giddish, who is on Law and Order SVU in the later season. She's Ice-T's partner. She's, like, this blonde actress. But when I see her face, her character had lived through some stuff before she became a detective. Mm-hmm. And every time I see her face, I'm like, she's lived through some stuff.
I think it's important in certain roles. I think it's very important, actually. So, do we talk about rules, I think, enough?
Well, the theme with this movie is they introduce more rules because we are now in a world where time travel has been used so much that, like, it's being fractured. And they even say at one point that the characters are exiles in time, which I think is a little bit of a cheap idea, but you know, that's the way it is in the movie.
Yeah, I hated this idea of like we don't really have an explanation, so we're just gonna throw in a word of like exiles in time.
Yeah, cause and effect. Who cares?
Yeah,
We're safe now from all that nonsense.
something
trying to think about.
that I wanted to bring up that I felt like didn't really make sense was who sent this good Pop's Terminator back in time to help her when she was 9 in the first place.
Well, I think in the original T2, when that same situation happened, it was John Connor. They took him and reprogrammed him and sent him back. And then we see in T2 how young John Connor learned how to do that by fixing him up.
Right.
So I think that's, like, if you were to extrapolate kind of what happened before, like, 1973, I think that would be the same, like, situation, where instead of 1995, it's 1973. The robots sent back a T-1000, John Connor gets a T-800, they reprogram it and send it back. It's just a different year.
I just think with John being the enemy in this story and whatever, like, I don't necessarily see how that plays out.
But that's the issue with what they've done in the timeline now, is because it's been changed so much. Like, when we see Kyle Reese have the memory flashback is when they hijack John Connor in that day where they put on his face and he gets hijacked right then. Mm-hmm. That is a change that didn't happen, well, first of all, with T2, and then now with this 1973 version where they get sent back. So this is like iterations of time travel. It's like, this is after it's been done a couple times. Now, this time around, they've hijacked John Connor. So it's like happening more than, like,
yeah.
It's just it's just like a delayed, even though it's in the future.
It's like the first time travel was like T1, second one is like T2, and then now we're seeing like a quote-unquote second time travel where that 1995 failed, right. So they sent it back to 1973, and now we're seeing a third time around where it's like they time travel again, but after they failed in 1973, they've created a new model which can infect humans, and so now we see that play out. It's like a weird.
I can definitely see why people felt it was convoluted, because you do have to kind of really sit down and like think about it. And I think the movie really does, which I appreciate. I appreciate it, but I think I can understand in the movies, it does expect the audience to keep up. It either wants you to keep up or just turn it off and just watch the action. And I think if you were caught in the middle where you were kind of trying to figure it out, but also try to just be like, all right, whatever, then you're a little bit like, what?
Yeah.
It's essentially like, this is boiling it down very simply, but it's essentially watching X-Men Apocalypse and not having seen Days of Future Past. It's just like, okay, wait, what? Like, how are all these characters there? You know what it's also like? It's like Gotham on TV. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. This
Bruce
timeline
is a child,
wrong.
why?
This timeline is wrong. Harvey Dent's supposed to be a friend he grew up with. Why is he already district attorney? What is going on? This show makes no sense.
Yeah, that show's like, wait, but what if we show Gotham before Bruce was Batman? Wait, but who's gonna be the villains? People expect Batman villains.
The Teenage Penguin.
Change the entire timeline.
Let's make Penguin a psychopath like the Joker, but the Penguin isn't. Shut up! Stop thinking!
Should have been on the CW, would have been better, just saying.
But Terminator Genisys, I actually think for the most part pulls it off, because even if you turn off your brain, you're still like, alright, you know what? I'm gonna have fun with this.
Yeah, I think I just don't like how convoluted it is. I think a movie like this doesn't need to be. I agree, I like movies that like you have to sit and think about it. Obviously, I mean, we've done dozens of them on this podcast, but a movie like this, to me, is action first. I shouldn't have to like sit and try and understand how your time travel and time rules work and like stuff like that. So
yeah, it's definitely convoluted. It didn't piss me off in how convoluted it is, because at least in the movie's logic of how time is like changing and all that sort of stuff, I'm like, okay, I can see that. I can see how like after using time travel so much, it can end up being this way.
Yeah.
But we don't see step by step how it got that way. We just are now living in a world where it's like, like the past has been changed, and the future, it's all like in flux.
Mm-hmm. So how did this good older Pops version survive at the end of the movie and like get improved?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, when John Connor is now in 2017 or whatever, he's brought all this technology from the future to the past. So he's made a time travel device. He's created the material for a T-1000, the liquid metal, but it doesn't form into T-1000s because it needs like I think they asked that, and Arnold is like, oh, because it needs to have like a processing unit, or I don't know. Like I think it needs its own separate
so
thing.
like because his head with the unit went into that liquid metal. That's
right.
Okay,
So
that didn't come across.
Well, yeah, it makes sense because they do play that up very nicely when they do. That's actually a very nicely put Planet C because they do play it up when the T-1000 comes in, and then a little bit of his liquid metal gets on the like out of commission old T-800, and then that one comes alive again. So then that's when they find the T-1000 and the T-800.
Right.
By the way, I love that. I don't know if it's just like a mental thing, like, or if it's just like you just can't see it differently that way, but I love that in all the Terminator movies, as soon as the T-800 loses its human skin, it becomes a much dumber and much slower.
That's so funny. I never realized that.
I do know, like in canon, in explaining the Sarah Connor Chronicles, that when they lose a human skin, they are not as fast. Because that's why they have human skin and muscles.
Because it's just metal on metal instead of like
metal grinding
flesh.
on concrete. You can't.
Yeah.
You don't have best joint support, basically.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
That's fair.
Which makes sense. I think that's a fair thing.
It's still a little silly, but it's
still a little silly. But you're like, all right.
That's funny.
I mean, yeah. Obviously, in the first movie, like it's claymation pretty much. It's like stop motion animation. So what are you gonna do? But in this day and age, you have to have some explanation for it.
For sure. Okay, so the consequences, I guess, ultimately they. Kyle Reese survives for now, I guess I should say.
I mean, we see the consequences more in this one because if you're not human, if you don't have flesh covering metal, then we'll actually see an explosion happen, as opposed to previously we just hear that, oh yeah, they have to have skin to go back in time. Now we actually see it as a device.
Yeah, I liked that.
And obviously the timeline's being fractured. That's more of a consequence now.
Yeah. It seems like now... in this one, they're changing the timeline, and it actually is more... it affects them more than previously, where it's just like, it's just a new timeline, who cares, we'll just continue, things are basically the same. Right. Now it's like, it's very different. So I appreciated that. Yeah. I know we've touched on scientific accuracy previously, but...
Yeah, I had an issue with, like, I don't know, like, they had... once you know how to do it, you can just do it and just get enough energy to do it. Like, they made a time travel device in 1984, because I guess Arnold knows how to do it because he's, part of Skynet and all that stuff in the future. But it's like, oh yeah, we just need energy and it'll be fine. Like, like the ball of energy that surrounds you, I don't think it creates a wormhole necessarily because we don't see a wormhole. They're in a field, they get sent somewhere, which isn't necessarily what a wormhole is. But if you use that same logic, you need a lot of energy to do it, realistically. Yeah. Not just a city grid worth of energy. You need I don't know, a lot more energy. It's sci-fi.
Yeah. Relevance to the story, they do go back and forth in time a couple times, so that's cool, and we live in these effects of this fractured timeline. I do wish maybe we could have seen a little bit more of, as it became this world now that's different, but...
they kind of cheaped us out on that by saying we're exiles in time so that they wouldn't have to show the cause and effect in the present day. Yeah. Because assuming that, Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor don't even have sex until at least 2017, there's no way John Connor could have been born to be old enough to do what he needed to do in 2030. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. When was he born then?
Well, it's also...
if he ever will be.
It's hinted that eventually Skynet's going to come back. So I guess the cycle repeats itself. Now just gets further in the future.
Later.
Right, exactly.
They've just delayed it. They haven't stopped it.
Yeah, but them saying they're exiles in time means that the quote unquote future date of them seeing the action when they actually went back in time the first time, that date didn't get pushed back because they're exiles in time now. That kind of idea, that cause and effect, they don't care about that because don't worry about it.
I think, I mean, they're just saying exiles in time to create a washed up explanation,
right? As to why he isn't vanishing or
and
whatever.
Not something like, well, this still happens because they're exiles in time. It's more just like, I don't really want to explain stuff, so they're just exiles in time.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Clothes and sets. The 80s did not look like it was in the 80s.
No, it
did not.
Especially if you watch Terminator 1, that is super 80s. Her hair.
They tried to copy in the beginning a little bit, some of the same scenes, which I appreciated a little bit. It was nice of them to kind of pay homage as much as they could
and stuff.
With the punks and but
Doesn't
you know.
feel 80s.
No, it doesn't.
You instantly
It
know
does
you're
not.
not in the 80s. Like, it just feels very,
Yeah.
Like if Sarah was wearing the same outfit she wore to the nightclub, it would have been hilarious and it would have been like, oh yeah, we're in the 80s with her hair all done up
Right.
and like I don't know, I think she had jean jacket or whatever she had on.
Yeah.
You know.
Would you guys want to experience this time travel?
I'm gonna say no because it doesn't look enjoyable to go through, and I don't know.
And you're naked, and robots want to kill you.
You end up on a freeway and almost you do get hit by a car.
Yeah.
And you're fine, apparently.
And you're fine. Yeah. Movie logic. I'm kind of on the fence. I could go either way, I think.
I just mean, like, I don't know. Like, why would I want to? Because you're stranded in the past. There's no way to get back to the future.
That's true. Yeah.
And the future sucks.
Yeah, the future
Yeah,
sucks.
that's true. I mean, you kind of just don't want to be anywhere in this world, to be honest. Nothing positive. And if you don't know what's going on, it's, like, worse.
Yeah.
Almost. You're just, like,
on your phone.
oblivious to
might get killed by
what you're creating.
Robot.
Yeah. Any other notes about this film that we hadn't touched on?
Yeah, I got a few.
Go ahead, Hyde.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, one, I like that they bring back Dyson's kid.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
that was
thank
a
you for
really
bringing
nice
it up,
touch.
yeah.
Well,
you can talk
and
more
him
about that.
too. He was in Dyson himself
Yes.
was there as well as his kid. Yeah, I like that too. That was nice.
Yeah, because like in T2, it was like in the 90s, and he was working on the technology, and his son was there. And then now in 2017, his son is like more important. He's
That'd be
like
cool
he's
if
like
it
in
was
his
the
30s.
same actor.
It would have been cool.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, that was a cool little touch. I thought that was a nice homage to T2.
Yeah, I agree.
I also like that J.K. Like, there's finally one cop in all of Los Angeles who finally like puts it together at least somewhat.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
like that. Like, he just like once he starts seeing crazy stuff, he's not like, okay, but no, I still have to uphold all the rules.
He's like, oh, I'm right.
He's just kind of more like, what's going on? We're here to save the world. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, because honestly, if I saw that, I would be like, this is something's happening here. And I hate in movies when like people see like this something that's never been seen before, and they're like, oh well, you still have to. I'm in charge now. It's like you clearly don't know what's going on. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
he was a good character. I liked him being like, oh, I've seen them before. Because I forgot about his character, and I was like, oh yeah, he was the guy that they like saved in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I liked the Looper scene of young versus old Arnold. It was kind of fun seeing them fight each other. That was,
Yeah,
that's
that's cool.
Yeah, I think it went on a little bit too long, but it was good.
yeah, it's like a 3-minute fight. It's probably like
It's
about a
little
minute
bit
too long.
Yeah. Trying to see if I have any other notes. I think we touched on most of my stuff. Oh, I do want to mention the romance in this movie too is like Sarah hates Kyle and then they fall in love at the end of the movie. It's just very cliche.
Yeah,
It's not founded in something. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about him being more of a soldier than like someone who actually like cared for her.
Yeah, the whole thing with her is that, like, I haven't been able to choose, and then once they save the day, it's like, oh, I can choose now. Well, I choose to love you. That part of it felt forced. The idea of her being like, I don't know you. Like, I like that stuff, where she was like, you think you know me, but my life isn't this. I don't know who you think I am. I don't choose to be with you.
Yeah, it wasn't so much that, like, I agree, like, starting with that was good and stuff, but I
The
think
end was a little...
Yeah, I think it could have been fine just, like, showing that they were learning how to fall in love, but it felt more like all of a sudden they already were in love just because they went through this together, where it's like, Sarah Connor is not that person.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially considering her changed past now. I think even more so.
Yeah, because she's only had a robot to live with and know, so, like, she should have been more awkward around people.
She doesn't understand a healthy, emotional, human love.
Yeah. Right, and it's also important to realize, is as much as it's a romantic storyline between her and Kyle Reese in the first Terminator, they really have sex because they're, like, about to die, possibly. Yeah. It's like that kind of stress level of, like, let's have sex.
It's never like, we have to mate because we're going to create the next whatever. It was like, it was like, oh, right,
it was just like a nice little twist.
Yeah, it was a twist.
It felt more natural in the first movie. This one, them being like, oh, and I love you, it felt forced.
It was like, she was at the point where she was, like, tougher, and she's like, you know what, sometimes we just want to have sex. Right. The world's going to end.
Yeah. Exactly. And we also talk about Matt Smith. Poor Matt Smith.
Yes, thank you for bringing up Matt Smith.
Matt Smith,
who I love dearly.
He's very interesting. He plays a very interesting character in this movie. He plays a very kind of snarky, cybernetic, whatever. And it's a very interesting kind of role.
Yeah.
But they
he's-
needed to have more of him or none of him at all.
Right.
Yeah,
The amount
he's-
that they had in here was not good either way.
like he's the physical embodiment of Skynet, and then we see him kind of we see the hologram or whatever become
Right.
Matt Smith as he evolves, quote unquote. But like, I don't know, we only see the actual corporeal form of him in the future, like, I don't know,
Right.
30 seconds total of footage.
Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you just, at that point, why wouldn't you just make it all Jason Clarke? Who also does a pretty
Yeah.
decent job. Why wouldn't you just make it all Jason Clarke? Like, Matt Smith, like, this dude was on the front cover of Entertainment Weekly, like, saying, like, that he was going to be a part of this movie.
Yeah.
Mm.
And he, like, he's barely in it.
It didn't need to be someone as recognizable as him, I think,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's kind of distracting because you keep
It
waiting for
is.
him to do more. It's kind of,
He
you know what the
doesn't do
equivalent is?
anything.
I know we're not reviewing this movie, but in Terminator Salvation, Helena Bonham Carter has a very similar role
Mm.
where she basically tricks Sam Worthington into making himself into a robot.
Mm.
And then at the end, she reveals herself in this hologram form that, like, I was the mastermind of your fate, basically. And it's basically that role, and not done any better.
Yeah, I think it could have been, like, I think it's fine if it was someone who was infiltrating his team or whatever,
Mhm.
and then, like, got to him and changed him, and then he just became Skynet himself. I don't
Right.
think it needed to be two separate things. I think that would have been pretty cool of a story to
Yes.
create and then
Like
continue.
a thing, like the thing,
Yeah.
or like some sort of parasite almost.
Like, this person who Skynet itself has, like, been trying so hard over and over again to stop him and kill him, and they can't do it, so they just make him become them.
Right.
And I think that would have been a really cool way to kind of evolve this franchise.
Right.
So, anyway, but we did not get that. They changed him, and then Matt Smith is still Skynet himself for some reason, and then there was that stupid, like, mid-credits scene.
I just thought who would have been a good replacement for Jack Courtney. Obviously, well, in 2015, it still could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Anton Yelchin is in Terminator Salvation.
Mm.
And I always felt like his character was misused. He's one of the best parts of Terminator Salvation. It would have been interesting to see him get another chance
Yeah, I could
and
have seen
play
that.
Kyle Reese.
Yeah.
Because Anton
Yeah.
Yelchin's very charismatic.
Yeah, he could have been
and
cool.
He would have been an interesting choice, I think.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, but we're
rest in
left with
peace.
this.
Rest in peace, Yelchin.
Aw. Okay, cool. So, final reviews. Sound good to everybody?
Sure.
So, Hyde, why don't you start again?
Okay, my movie rating, this really pleasantly surprised me. The action scenes are good. The story is interesting enough. I have some, the acting, it's good enough. Like, no one's doing a bad job. So I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10 because there's enough that makes it, I'll probably revisit this movie one day.
Mhm.
So, 6.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. I liked it in general. I didn't loathe it. I wouldn't. Yeah, I'd watch it eventually. Maybe not anytime soon, but like maybe in 5 years I'll watch it again. I liked Emilia Clarke in general. I didn't necessarily like her as Sarah Connor all the time, but I like her as an actress. Arnold was good. I liked him as like old Terminator. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, him and his smile. I love his smile.
Yeah, his smile. Like, he had all the funny moments, I felt like, and he did a good job with it. He understood enough, like, what this movie was and what the franchise is, and, like, this is what people want to see, and this is what I'm going to give them. The action and a little bit of humor and, like, some of the dryness. And it's great. I liked, the nods that they did to other movies and stuff like that, and tried to evolve the story and made it more in-depth. So, 6 out of 10.
Right. I'll probably end up at a 7 because I was also pleasantly surprised by it. I thought that they definitely went for it, and I'm glad that they did. They took risks, and I like that. It made it more complicated to, everything like that, but it wasn't unthinkable to think of how they got there. Like, so, it was complicated enough. Like I think it was more than it had to be for this kind of movie. Like, I think Jen, you mentioned that earlier. But I thought it did a good job of, like, kind of holding on to what the franchise has been up to this point and then changing it, Mm-hmm. So there's enough, like, nods to other movies, and we kind of see how it's similar then also different, and they change things, and and obviously Arnold was great in this. The explanation of his like skin aging was great because now it's like present day, and obviously he's older, and now when he looks, it's like, oh yeah, I buy that. He's the same Terminator, like kind of that he was younger, but now he just aged, So yeah,
He
and
took the long way around.
yeah, and that's
He
cool.
should.
And yeah, the action was fine. I was bored during T3 sometimes, but this action was like I had said, they did enough things that was different, and yeah, I liked it enough.
Cool.
Yeah.
Time travel?
Time travel, this is something I was thinking about. I was, even up to the point I was driving here, I was like, I'm not sure how I feel because, on the one hand, it is kind of messy, the time travel, and a lot of like nexus points and sci-fi mumbo jumbo that doesn't really mean anything. But every choice they make with time travel is bold, and the movie technically never breaks its time travel rules, mainly because you don't understand them necessarily, but they don't have, it never feels like they did something like, well, now that can't happen because of blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Everything still works. It builds on what the previous franchises had created instead of trying to destroy it for the sake of some plot they wanted to do. Like, we gotta destroy it so Claire Danes and Nick Stahl can get busy in a bunker. Why?
Yeah, who cares?
So I'm gonna be maybe a little generous, but I'm gonna give the time travel a 5, just because it's so interesting despite its flaws that I give it credit. I give it some kudos.
I actually agree with you on the time travel too. We're like on the same page today.
Yeah.
My because I was thinking 5 also because I agree. It was like I do think that it was more convoluted than it needed to be. But I like they go to the past and the future, so there's like multiple different quote-unquote present days that they're living in, so that gets some points. I like that the woman gets to time travel, I guess. That's the points there.
Yeah,
that's always good.
Finally.
Yeah, that it's not just the Terminator was kind of nice. But yeah, in general, it didn't really drive me too crazy. There's a few things that I kind of didn't like. I didn't like their easy explanation of exiles in time, which is just a bunch of bullshit and like made me hate John Connor even more for saying it in the first place. And just kind of like the logic behind, Arnold going back to save young Sarah, and then I wish that they kind of could have showed something to like help me to connect that when his head and CPU fell into the liquid metal that it created this upgraded version of him, because I didn't make that connect until we talked about it. So, yeah, 5 out of 10.
Yeah, so I gave my base rating of time travel for T1 and T2 a 5 because, like, I said that during T3. And this movie, they had kind of the same basis, but then they expand on it in a way that I liked. Again, it was more convoluted, as we keep saying, but I didn't hate it for doing that because it, like, did something different. It actually, like, tried to do something different. They don't just get sent back in time and have to fight robots. Like, time has been changed. He has new memories, alternate timelines are involved, and then they travel to the future. And, like, so they do way more with it. And I like that they took those risks. And I thought it was more or less well done. I also agree that Exiles in Time is dumb, and it's a plot. It's just for them to write it off and say, don't think about it, which I dislike. But I like it more. I like how it expanded on that base time travel rule. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Cool. All right. So our next episode is back to my... Oh, sorry. Before we get into that, Rotten Tomatoes is 26% for Terminator Genisys, which
Feels
we were
low.
pretty surprised. It seems a little bit low. Critics say, mired in its muddled mythology, Terminator Genisys is lurching retread that lacks the thematic depth, conceptual intelligence, or visual thrills that launched this once mighty franchise.
That's my review for Terminator 3.
Yeah.
Right. It's like they both kind of switched.
Yeah. So weird. 53% of audiences liked it, which is around closer to what we gave. So that, I guess, fits. Critics don't know all. Okay, so back to next episode is back to my choice. We're going to cover, going back to TV, we're going to cover Heroes, which is another, as I think we've mentioned before, if you listen to one of our TV episodes is that we're starting really with like the big time travel TV shows that people think of. So Heroes is definitely one of those. We're going to be covering 2 different episodes. The time travel itself is basically the same sort of thing. It's a show based about people who have special abilities.
And one of them has the power to time travel.
One of them has the power of time travel.
Well, at least one.
So we will
Mainly
talk.
one.
We will talk
One
about
and a
it.
half. One and a half.
People. We're doing 2 different episodes. We're doing the first one will be season 1, episode 10, which is called 6 Months Ago, which is when Hero goes back in time to save Charlie. The other one we're gonna do is season 3, episode 4, called I Am Become Death. And that's also another time travel episode, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't cover it. So, brush up on your heroes. Season 1, just in general, is really great. So don't feel like you need to watch the whole thing, but watch some of season 1 if you're into it, because it's pretty good. So, okay.
Do we have a review?
We do, but I think we're actually, because this is already a pretty long episode, we'll just cover it before Heroes on the next episode.
I
So
stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Appreciate the review.
And again, if you review us, we'll kind of make a time travel story about you, just off our domes.
Yeah. Ew, that's a weird word. Don't use that. Write us a review on iTunes, and we will come up with some sort of a random, spontaneous time travel story for you. Okay, our social media. We are at Time Travel Trio on Twitter and on Instagram, and we are the Time Travel Trio podcast on Facebook, so please follow us on all of those. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. If you rate, subscribe, follow us on all those as well. We would very much appreciate it. As we mentioned, rate us on iTunes, please. And personal, I am at Jen Marlis on Twitter and on Instagram.
I'm at Foreman in Space.
And I'm at Robinson is Hyde.
And
with that,
we are out of
time.